So welcome all to another of our The Arts and Craft of Game Programming sessions. Today we have Attilio Carotenuto from Himeki
Hello.
Games. Okay, so without further ado, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for coming. I'm Attilio. You hear me well? Cool. Okay, I'm Attilio. I'm a game developer. I live in London by moving to Lisbon, so I thought that was a good way to introduce myself and talk a bit about what do I do and, yeah, pretty much show more info about my latest project and how to use Unity. So that's my presentation. So a bit of background about me. I used to work in London for those companies, so you may know some of those games. So I used to work on the Team Social as a tools developer, Barbino Saga, a bunch of others. And that's actually another game that we made recently. It's been out last month for Android and iOS. But in this talk, I'm going to talk about An Off to the Stars. So An Off to the Stars is a Danmaku shoot 'em up, like a bullet hell shoot 'em up. I don't know if you know, like Ikaruga, Dodonpachi, this kind of hardcore game. It's one of my favorite genres, so I decided to, make some, like, after years of working on very good games, but not really my type of games, I decided to make something that I really liked, and that's An Off to the Stars. So the game is ready. There is a demo available on each, so we are pretty much close testing and balancing the game. So it's gonna be out soon on each and Steam. And in this talk, I'm gonna talk about it. So it's gonna be a technical talk. So I'm gonna talk about the way we made the game in Unity, the best ways and the pitfalls that we found, and I'm gonna give some advices. And so I have some pointers in the presentation, and after that, I'm gonna open the project, and you can ask about pretty much anything. So to give some more information about the game, I'm gonna show a short trailer. Where is it? Yes. So that's the trailer you can find on the Steam page. And yeah, it's. So yeah, that's the game, and that's the team that work on the game. It's around 10 people, I think. So I made the programming, direction, and design. And then there are 3D artists, 2D artists, composer. Yeah. So let's start with initial setup. So I started the project 2 years ago. I usually work on like 3 or 4 games at the same time, so it's not 2 years. But yeah, it started 2 years ago. I started using Unity because I had experience with it, and I think it was a good match. So first of all, version control. I'm the only programmer, so there's not much in the way of conflicts. Now there is Unity Collaborate, which is pretty good. With like when you have to work on the same scene. But yeah, at the time, I think it was still in beta, so we started using Git. So Git, Bitbucket, and SourceTree. So that's pretty much. And then we have actually a dev blog for the game because I thought it was a good way, when I was on my own and I decided that having a dev blog and sharing updates about the game is a very good way to keep you motivated and give info about the game, start building a bit of audience. And it worked really well for me. So if you go to the dev blog, you can find from day one up until now how the game, grew from, sprites moving on the screen to a full game. So, and yeah, it's It's very good to see. So, so I'm going to start with describing all the game, like the main game loop and the level data. So as you've seen, the game is the actual gameplay is 2D, so it's a model moving on a plane, and the background is 3D, like full 3D is moving, but the actual gameplay is 2D, like a vertical scrolling. So that's the way I make the levels. So if you look, that's the level editor that I built inside Unity. It's a custom scene. So I put markers, and you see the background moving, but you're actually always in the same place. So the way the game works is there is actually a timeline. So in the editor, the y-axis is the time. So you start from the blue line, which is 0, and then I put markers, so you will have 4 delta enemies, I think, at the second 1, and then other 4 second 2, and that's it. So that's like a timeline. So I put markers there, and and the red ones are events, like all the bars are events. So that's how I create levels. And when I'm finished with the level, it's then serialized in a JSON file. One thing that sometimes developers do is they have different levels in the game, and they create a scene for every level. But I don't think that's great, because if you want to make changes to the UI or things that are shared between all the levels, that takes a lot of time and it's really messy. So in the game, we only have one scene. And then if you look, that's a snippet of a level. So there is the type of enemy, the initial position, the movement descriptor, rotation speed, and the way it's shooting, the type of shooting, all different kind of metadata. Minimum difficulty, so I will say this enemy will spawn only if you're playing on normal, hard, higher. Yeah. So we got this JSON file. Yeah, the enemy data. So that's another snippet. So you see all the data, and the event. So events are similar to enemies. So there is a time. The Y is time in this case. The event name, which is pretty much, in this case, stop scrolling. So it means that the timeline will stop until you kill all the enemies. And then there is the payload, which is some more metadata about the actual event. So these are all the type of event. There is stop until enemies are killed, start dialogue, which we actually removed, but and then start the boss and end the level. And so the thing with Unity is that usually you have a lot of common elements in all these scenes, but you also want to be able to start the game from any scene. So a solution that I found, it's to have, from Unity 5.4, I think, or something like that, you can have more than one scene open at the same time. So what we did is having a scene that contains all the managers, like the singleton, you will call, and from there, that scene is also responsible from loading the second scene. So you always have two scenes open at the same time. And as I say, that's the game scene. So he has the UI, game manager, this stage, and then that's responsible from loading the data from JSON and showing the enemies, picking the right background. And cameras. So as you see, there is a camera manager, and the game, as I said, the gameplay is 2D, but the world is 3D. So the way that we did is we have 3 cameras actually rendering the game. So the first camera is for gameplay, it's an orthographic one, so they are always on the same plane. And then there is a perspective camera that renders the background. So they're actually separated. And then there is another one which is on top, and it's just to make sure that VFX and the scoring, flying score is always rendered on top of everything. It's just a utility one. So input. The way the game works, we wanted to support as many input methods as possible. It's a very niche kind of genre, and all the people that play this game, they expect to have, the input mapping and all kind of they want arcade stick and all the kind of remote input control. So the way we did it is we use Rewired. Rewired, I don't know if you ever used it, but Rewired is a plugin on the asset store, and it's really, really good. It's not too expensive also. And Unity input is okay, but this one is much more powerful. So as you see, that's the setup window. So you have like a huge list of joypad and input system that they're supported straight away. So I mean, you install it and you have all of them. And you can create actions, and then you can link the action to the different inputs, and yeah, and then you have players, and you can create setups and change the setups for each player. It's really powerful. I would recommend compared to the Unity one. It also supports touchscreen and mouse, keyboard. So yeah, it's a really good one. And it also has control mapping out of the box. So that's pretty much a prefab that you can skin. So usually it takes a bit of time to implement all of that, but that also like hot input, so yeah, you can connect a controller straight away, will appear there in the list, and you can, so yeah, it's really powerful, and I think it saved a lot of time, so it's a good one. And yeah, as you see, I don't know if you play Danmaku shooters, but the way they work is that you have these enemies, and they have very kind of complex bullet patterns, and so that may take some time to implement. We actually been really lucky because when we started the project, there was someone else working on something similar, and they released on the asset store this Danmaku engine, and that saved, I would say, like at least 2 months, because they already had like a scripting system to create the bullet patterns and shooting and some more basic stuff. So I was very lucky, and so yeah, my recommendation would be every time you can try and look in the asset store, because even if it sounds expensive, like I don't know, even like 50 or 100 euro, it's really not compared to what you will have to pay a programmer or do it yourself. So yeah, we were lucky on this, and the way it works is that's a bullet pattern. So that's kind of it's DN-JSON, but it's really JSON. So you have a root, and then you have different kind of commands. So that would say, for example, repeat all the time, and then you have shoot, shoot, wait, and then shoot, shoot, wait. And I think that's the one that are rotating, like it's the circles rotating. So we don't hard code anything, and that's really good also because that's data. That's not, it's code, but then it gets compiled and it's data. So you can easily swap bullet patterns at runtime, and you can even download them. So if you want to make like a DLC, we can just put them in a server and download them as startup. So yeah, that's a really good one. And yes, so other things, pipeline, yes. So as you saw, the game is pretty simple, like from the art style. So it's all 3D. We use FBX from either Blender or Maya, whatever they used. Initially, the artist was using Blender, and in Unity, you can actually put blend files directly in Unity, but we found it doesn't work very well because you need Blender installed, and you need the actual version that they use installed. So we're working with contractors, and they didn't have Blender, and so we spent a lot of time trying to make them work. So I don't really recommend doing this. Like, the best way is just to export to FBX or any other format. And we actually don't have textures, so like that's one boss. But the colors are embedded in the vertices, so there are no textures. So the game is really light for this reason. And the poly count is also very low. So because we wanted to support as many platforms as possible and mobile, so like from a memory point of view, we're in a very good spot. Because as you can see, the geometries are really simple, the colors are all embedded, so yeah. And yeah, translations. I created a system to translate the game in different languages. So the way it works is you have this CSV file, and each column is a language, and then you have the key on the first column. So instead of hard coding the text, or even putting like a text file with all these strings, you will use this, and in each text field you will give the key, and it will get the right language. That's very convenient because it's convenient to edit, and it's also very convenient to send to translators and contractors, because you can pretty much just add that column and it will work. And yeah, get parser start, so yeah, it's just once, and yeah. And audio. a bit similar with input. Unity audio is fine, I mean it works, but it's not very powerful. So initially we were using a plugin called Sound Manager Pro, which I think is deprecated now, so it's, yeah. I mean, it still works, but yeah, it's not. And then we moved to Fabric. It's not very popular, but it's actually really, really good. It's not in the asset store, so you have to download. It's called Tadsman or something. I can share the link. So it's an audio plugin that lets you do all kind of crazy, interesting things. So you have random groups, you have sequences, in, loop, and out. So as you can see there, for example, there is enemy explosion big, and that just gets a random one. Or for delaser, for example, delaser has like a initial sound, then a loop, and a out sound where you stop shooting. And yeah, it lets you do all those kind of things. So it's a really good one. So yeah, I would recommend if you need something more than just fire and forget. And yeah, there are social features, so we have leaderboard achievements. For Steam, we used, Steam doesn't give you any kind of like Unity plugin, it's all C++. So there is a wrapper there that you can use. It's pretty good. And we also have an iOS and Android version on the working. So, and yeah, we just use the social API that it's in Unity. Where it's iOS and Android, you also need to add the, the jars, but yeah, it worked for us. And, oh yeah, performance. So, of course, I mean, first thing, like, we use pooling, because, I mean, we reuse we have thousands of bullets, hundreds of enemies, so yeah, it's a, no-brainer. So, the thing is, instantiate and destroy are really expensive, so you should avoid using them during gameplay. So the best thing is creating everything you need, or you think you may need at startup, and just reusing them. So yeah, we reuse bullets, enemies, VFX, like all the explosion, all the score flying, that's all reused, we never destroy them. And yeah, one thing is you have to make sure that when you destroy before reusing them, you have to reset the state, so like HPs for enemies, shooting patterns, everything. But yeah, it's, because otherwise you're gonna get like lags and you're gonna get the performance issues with the garbage collecting, so yeah, avoid using them. And physics, the game uses physics, well, it's very simple, just collisions. And if you go to Unity, the settings, the physics settings, there is this matrix. So you should use this one because here you have the different layers and you can disable collision for layers you don't need. So you should always keep it to a minimum, and that's gonna save you a lot of calculations. And you should always try to approximate the colliders, the size and the shape. So never use mesh colliders, and always use, I don't know, if it's sort of a box, this is a box, or yeah, use maybe like, you can also make up different, like you can put like a sphere and a box, another sphere, just to, create complex colliders, but yeah, never use mesh or something like that because it gets really heavy. And also actually, if you can avoid physics, like for example, we have the collectibles, so when you destroy enemies, they release collectibles. We don't use physics for the collision, we just check the distance. So try to use, like when you can, avoid using colliders. And yeah, this is for the meshes in the game. So there's just some advices to put mesh compression high, and if you don't need to manipulate the mesh at runtime, just disable the read-write, optimize mesh, and if you don't need animation, just disable rig and the animations. And that's more for the build side. So we managed to reduce the game for like 200 megabytes, like from 400 to 200, just by changing these settings. So when you import textures in Unity, they usually have the highest size, and they don't have any compression, and they have MIP maps. MIP maps is pretty much it's pretty much for 3D games. Like, let's say you play in Skyrim and you have something that is very far. So MIP maps is generating different sizes of the texture. So like, you have a very high definition, very nice texture where you're close, but when you're very far, it's gonna use the 32 by 32 one. In this game, we don't need it because there's never kind of distance. So we disable. So if you don't need mip maps, you should always disable it because it's going to use a lot of memory because for each texture it's going to generate a lot of copies. And compression and max size, you should always, it's going to take some time, but you should always go for each texture and go to the minimum size you can. And that's really going to save you a lot. Like we say, like pretty much half of the size, like 200 megabytes. And yeah, compression as well. Just try everything and until it looks good or good enough. And yeah. And yeah, that's a recap. So initially we also have all kind of effects. So we have depth of field. We wanted to add some blooms because you get artists and they get all very excited and they all want to do some crazy things. And yeah, that's very expensive, especially for a game like ours, which has to be like 60 FPS, rock solid, all very stable because it's an action game. So yeah, we had to remove all of that. And there is something in Unity resources.load. So pretty much in the library in Unity, when you have a resources folder, these elements get included in the build regardless. Like when you build, Unity tries to remove assets that you're not using. It's not super reliable, but it tries. But everything that it's in a folder called resources in any part of the tree, it will get included. And you can actually use load to load these resources, either music, sprites, game objects. We started using that because it's convenient, because you can pass a string to load a resource, but it's pretty heavy, so you should always try and either use that just as startup before gameplay or just use references. So have some kind of prefab archive, so like all the enemies are in a prefab with all the reference, so you can just use that to reference. So yeah, avoid using that. And yeah, Unity methods, they are really popular, of course, because they are really easy. And when you start, it's great, you have awake, on enable, update. But yeah, they are not great. Like actually, if you do some profiling, the performance are not great. So like when we started, all the enemies had their own updates and start and everything, but the performance were not good. So we had to create an enemy manager, which is responsible for handling all the enemies, and it is only one update. So that's responsible for updating all of them, initializing, destroying. So yeah, try to avoid them as much as possible. I mean, sometimes it's convenient, so if it's a small script, it's fine. But for something like enemies that happens on every frame, try to avoid using those. And it's also not great for control. Like you lose some control because you don't really know what's going to happen first, and there is some order depending on the hierarchy, and also like in the Unity settings, you can set the script execution order. But yeah, it gets messy really easily, and yeah, you lose some control. So yeah, I will always use managers and like just one place, central place, and from there update everything. Yeah, tweak, yeah, we said that. So yeah, tweak physics, import settings. Yeah, that's more like we dropped some features during the game. So like when you start working on a game, you're always gonna work on stuff that you're not gonna use. So the game has lasers. Yeah, that's how the game looked at the beginning. So we did all the. It was pretty cool actually. We will have obstacles, and the laser will reflect in the obstacle. But yeah, it was too messy, and it was very hard to balance because it was very unpredictable. So you will have unavoidable kills. So we had to drop that. And the game had dialogues at the beginning, so that's the dialogue editor. We dropped that too because yeah, it's not very. It was distracting, and yeah, I think people were not like they would rather not be bored with dialogues during the game, just between levels. So we dropped that. And yeah, we also have, I implemented AI for the game, so the game can actually play itself, and it's sort of an input method. But yeah, we dropped that, and we dropped explosive chain enemies as well. So yeah, these are my contacts. So that was pretty much like giving some pointers, so you know a bit more about the game. If you want to know more about me, or you want more info, that's my email, that's my Twitter, and website and everything. So Q&A. So yeah, I'm gonna pretty much open the project, so you can ask anything, and yeah.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for the awesome tips regarding building the projects with Unity. You talked about avoiding mesh colliders, going always for primitive objects. But if you need, like, for example, a mesh collider that resembles a box but is not actually a box, so you'll have only 8 vertices, so it will function as a box. Is it okay, or were you talking about mesh colliders with too much vertices?
Yeah, I mean, of course, depending on the number of vertices, the performance will impact the performance. So if it's few vertices, it should be fine. But like, what I mean is, if you don't really need like very precise collisions, it's always better to approximate. So like if you have this arm, it will be like 1,000 of vertices, but instead you just use a box, and it's gonna be pretty much the same. Another thing you can do is, if you really, really want the collision with a mesh, you can pretty much put a box around it. So you use the collision check with that box, and only if you're colliding with that box, then you check the collision with the mesh. So that's kind of a 2 steps. So you avoid useless collisions because you're sure that it's not colliding. But yeah, it's always a trade-off between accuracy and performance. So, but if it doesn't have too many vertices, should be fine. But yeah, my advice would be always to use primitives, like capsules, box, spheres.
Hello.
Hey.
So you talked about the Unity magic methods.
Yes.
Can you show us an example of what you did for it? I got the idea that you should have a manager and update everything, but can you go into specifics about it?
Well, I can show the enemies manager, I guess. So that's mono behavior, so it's gonna has the usual update, and so in this case, instead of using the Unity update, there is I pass the delta time, and like all the enemies are in a list, so I just go through them and update them one by one. It's pretty much the same, but I have more control because I know the order of the updates. I can also, like, for example, if you pause the game, well, I mean, sometimes some game they just set delta, the time scale to 0, but in some other games you don't want to do that. So, like, for example, if you need to pause the game, you can pretty much just put 1, like, if it's paused, not update. But if you're using the Unity methods, you have to do that on all the. So yeah, that's because they are the Unity methods, what they do is pretty much when they start, they get added to a list in Unity, and it's so, like, performance-wise, it's not really good. You can do some profiling if you want in your game to see it. The profiling in Unity is actually pretty good, so we use quite a lot. So I don't know if you, So yeah, you can use this one where you run the game and compare. But yeah, if you can, you should always try to group them, and yeah.
Thank you.
More questions?
About the destroy command.
Yes.
How would you implement it so because in our game we're destroying a lot of units, how would you go about destroying a lot of things within the actual update loop without actually using destroy all the time?
So what we do in the game, we don't actually destroy pretty much anything, we just disable them. So we disable the game object because we know it's going to be reused. So it's going to stay in memory. So it's of course you're going to use some more memory, but it's fixed. So you're not going to have the jumps in the frame rate. So what we do is we create all the objects at the start, and we just keep them reusing them, disable and enabling all the time. I don't know, it depends on your game. If you think you're gonna reuse them or you're gonna just, like I don't know, like I haven't seen the game, but like you...
Oh, it's like a strategy game, so there's like multiple like enemy units, and there's different types. So.
Well, I guess in that case you may reuse them because I mean you're gonna recreate them. So it's better to just put them in a pool and just disable them, and then when you need them, just I mean worst case scenario they just stay in memory and they were there already. So you're gonna have it's gonna be stable because even if you don't need them, destroying is gonna give you some kind of performance. You're gonna see some spikes because it's gonna clean up and destroy and clean the memory. So it's better to keep them, especially if you need them.
So that's it?
Yep. Okay, so thank you, Attilio, for coming.
Thank you.
I suppose you can join Attilio here and ask for a few more questions.
Yeah, fair.
Closer to the game. So, thanks for coming.
Thank you.